I figured I'll crank out a couple of podcasts on this Sunday morning, but I have just gotten screwed a little bit because for some reason my recording setup with its headphone and the camera is producing some scratchy sound. So I produced a 20-minute podcast and saw that it was scratchy, so I went back and re-recorded it. Had scratchy sound again. So I have tested this time with the short recording. Seems okay, but I hope I won't go for another 20 minutes and find some sound problems again. So we are talking about the ships in capacity development for resilience. Right now we are in relationships and friendships, and relationships lead to power, you know, external partners, internal partners, and there are various types of powers that we've been talking about, and we ended here, but let me read it again. Authority is, in other words, a complex concept, which I think Hearn summarizes best here. When we talk of an authority, sometimes we simply refer to constituted bodies that have the capacity, like it or not, to issue binding orders. For instance, a local government's ability to levy taxes, or a law enforcement agency's ability to issue tickets for traffic infringements. Obvious examples, but this attenuated sense shades into other uses where principled acceptance of authority's power is more explicit. Authority's power. So we are talking about power and authority and domination and legitimacy, but there is also authority's power. So we'll see what that means in a minute. So here, for example, we believe our doctor knows her stuff, so she's an authority, but she has a power to tell us what to do, take medication, and so on. That our government office holders were elected fair and square, so we gave them authority, then they have power over us. There are thinner and thicker senses of authority. So where do we go with this? However, there is one more kind of authority that is overlooked in most literature on power, but which plays an important role in capacity development. Economic power has been a fundamental power since the beginning and is in our contemporary world again concentrated in the hands of a few. So we talk about the 1% in US, or now it's become 1% in the world, people who control wealth, or countries, global north versus global south, and who has the economic power. So economic power obviously includes domination, as control over money generally facilitates control over decision making, agenda setting, and so on. This happens a lot in the UN, with all the permanent members of the Security Council able to veto this and that and everything else. In terms of authority, controlling financial resources also facilitates having your wishes voluntarily obeyed if that would lead to some reward. That sounds complicated. Basically, that means that if there is a recipient who's getting, let's say, economic help, aid, loan, whatever, then the economic power that's providing the aid or loan is going to have enough power to put conditions where the recipient of the loan has to voluntarily obey the wishes of the donor, because that comes with a benefit to the recipient. So you make a compromise on what wishes you want to obey just to get this help, right? This might be referred to as induced authority and is rooted in the very core of all capacity development projects and programs that are financially supported by external actors. Here's a good example. This is Vice President Hillary Clinton from the days, I think that's, yeah, she was meeting, I think this is Dlamini Zuma from South Africa, who obviously came to the US to seek some help, and US has generously helped them. Some agreement has been made. There is a photo up with smiles on their faces, and obviously South Africa got something, but South Africa knows that it comes with conditions that they must obey from the US to be able to receive this, but they are okay because that gives them something that they need, right? So it's not that we can end power. I think I'm in the wrong place. So power is a fundamental aspect in capacity development that must not be ignored, but instead explicitly considered in the design, implementation, and evaluation of projects and programs. Each context has its specific nexus of relationships of power between all partners, often including various forms of domination and authority. So there is a continuum of power, authority, domination, legitimacy, and so on, sometimes all mixed in. There might be partners trying to force their will through at there may be partners trying to force their will through at meetings or controlling what is discussed in the first place. So agenda is set by them, so the weaker of the partners may not even have their voices heard. Internal partners generally have legal authority in the context of their own area of responsibility, be it a country, municipality, or functional sector, while external partners may come with advanced expertise and often with financial resources. So there is an inequality or a power disparity there. If we are serious in our efforts to facilitate local ownership and strong partnerships, we must do our utmost to navigate this minefield of power. So in words, the external partner may say that they are there to build local ownership and want strong partnership, but it is still a minefield. It's not that we can ever end the power. That's simply impossible. What we can do is to be vigilant and resolute in identifying and addressing power relations that undermine capacity development. Or as Hearn so eloquently ends his magnum opus on power, finally humanity must live with extreme levels of extreme levels of power that we have today, and probably even greater levels in the future. So this goes back to the global north creating more and more emissions with their energy intensive lifestyles, accumulating carbon, creating climate change, impacts happening on the global south, who need help to build capacity for resilience and adaptation, disaster management, and so on. And this is expected to get worse for now, right? To cope with that situation, we must on some level reconcile ourselves to this power being an unavoidable, inevitable aspect of life on this planet. As just suggested in regard to problems of power distribution and inequality, this does not mean that we have to acquiesce or take no stance in regard to power, but it does mean that we have to let go of dreams of ultimately transcending, resolving, or outwitting the burdens of power. We cannot theorize our way out of it. We must be powerful, and we must learn better how to do it. So obviously economic development from China and India are good examples of how you get to be more and more powerful regionally and globally and still keep battling each other for domination in a geopolitical sense or economic sense, right? There is a particular type of relationship then that involves all requisites for facilitating partnerships for effective capacity development, and that's friendship. I mention India and China because they are dealing a lot in trade, inevitable for both of them, and yet there is not really a strong friendship there. So these are issues to deal with. So friendship in this sense is of course a state of mutual trust and support, and has been suggested as an explicit part of effective capacity development frameworks. Friendship is built on trust, entails mutual support between friends, is generally conceived as one of the more egalitarian relationships in terms of power possible between human beings, but when you talk about two countries, it can work in many ways. But even otherwise in social science, alliances between groups at some scale beyond individuals, or even between individuals, always can reform based on what's the current situation, what's the current trading needed for mutual benefit, even though there may be power disparities between the individuals or the groups. However, friendships also involve affection and loyalty, which might complicate things when situation calls for uncomfortable decisions for the partners. So going back to China and India, let's say India is now becoming more and more of a friend with the US. US sees China as a competitor or even an enemy or whatever. So India has to deal with China carefully as for trade and other reasons, local dynamics, national security and military power and so on, border disputes, etc. But when US demands that India do certain things with respect to China, affection and loyalty must play into it, while protecting interests as well. Same plays out with Russia, US, and India, for example. Although I have not found any studies of the balance between the pros and cons of friendship in capacity development, I think the positive sides of mutual trust and support between equals outweighs the negative sides of potentially being overly lenient when dealing with problems in partnerships. So it's a long sentence, doesn't necessarily say much specific that we can use here, but it again comes down to saying not having friendship may not be necessary. So close personal friendship is not a requisite for capacity development, but enmity is definitely damaging and indicating some level of rapport as a minimum for capacity development to work at all. So let's say we go to India and China example, and China gets India and Pakistan as an example. Let's say Pakistan gets hammered by a disaster, earthquake, climate, floods, etc., and needs help from India, and India is willing to give it, but there is not a great friendship between them, and this can actually affect the dynamics of how the help is offered and received or perceived, and so on and so forth. So enmity can have a damaging impact on capacity development for resilience, but friendship may not necessarily be required as a bottom line or as a necessary condition, because business dealings can happen without friendships when there is mutual benefit involved. Okay, so hopefully this time the sound is good and I don't have to do it again, because I wasted, whoops, this is not a good idea. I wasted 40 minutes recording 45 minutes and now redoing it. So we'll come back and look at stewardship and mentorship. Okay, so see you in the next podcast, hopefully without me having to record it again. Let's see.